The morning sun cast long shadows across the cobblestone courtyard of Windsor Castle as 8-year-old Thomas Fletcher clutched his mother's hand tightly. His small fingers were sticky with jam from the breakfast roll he had devoured too quickly in his excitement. Today was different from any other day in his short life. His mother, Sarah, worked as a seamstress in the castle's textile workshop, mending the elaborate tapestries and curtains that adorned the royal chambers. But, today, she had been summoned to bring Thomas along for a special reason that neither of them fully understood. Thomas had always been fascinated by the grand castle where his mother worked. Every evening, she would return home with stories of the magnificent halls, the gleaming armor displayed in corridors, and the stern-faced guards who marched with perfect precision through the ancient stone passages. But he had never imagined he would actually set foot inside those legendary walls. The castle seemed to tower above him like a mountain made of grey stone, with flags fluttering in the crisp autumn breeze and windows that sparkled like jewels in the morning light. Sarah Fletcher had received the unusual request 3 days earlier. A messenger had arrived at their modest cottage on the outskirts of the village, bearing a sealed letter with the royal crest. The message was brief but intriguing. The head seamstress required Sarah's immediate assistance with a delicate project, and she was specifically instructed to bring her young son along. No explanation was provided for why Thomas's presence was necessary, which had kept Sarah awake for 2 nights running, wondering what purpose an 8-year-old boy could possibly serve in the royal household. As they approached the imposing main entrance, Thomas marveled at the size of everything around him. The doors were twice the height of any he had ever seen, crafted from dark oak and adorned with intricate ironwork that depicted lions and crowns. 2 guards flanked the entrance, their red uniforms immaculate and their expressions stoic. Thomas had heard his mother describe these guards countless times, but seeing them in person was entirely different. They stood motionless as statues, their tall black hats adding to their imposing stature, and their polished boots reflecting the morning sunlight. The guard on the left, a man with graying temples and kind eyes despite his stern demeanor, nodded to Sarah as she presented her credentials. Thomas noticed how the man's gaze lingered on him for a moment, and he felt a strange mixture of nervousness and excitement. The guard's uniform was adorned with golden buttons that seemed to catch and hold every ray of sunlight, and a ceremonial sword hung at his side, its silver hilt gleaming with an almost magical quality that captured Thomas's imagination. Inside the castle, Thomas felt as though he had stepped into a fairy tale. The corridors were wider than the main street of his village, with ceilings so high that his voice echoed when he whispered to his mother. Portraits of stern-faced kings and elegant queens lined the walls, their painted eyes seeming to follow him as he walked past. Enormous chandeliers hung overhead like frozen waterfalls of crystal, and Turkish rugs covered the stone floors in intricate patterns of blue, gold, and crimson that told stories of distant lands and ancient battles. Sarah led Thomas through a maze of corridors toward the textile workshop where she spent her days. Along the way, they passed servants hurrying about their duties, carrying silver trays laden with fine china, polishing already spotless furniture, and arranging fresh flowers in elaborate vases. Thomas tried to absorb every detail, knowing that he would want to remember this day for the rest of his life. The very air seemed different inside the castle, heavy with history and importance, scented with beeswax from the candles and a faint hint of lavender from the sachets placed throughout the rooms. The textile workshop was located in the castle's east wing, in a room that had once served as a library but had been converted to accommodate the seamstresses and their equipment. Tall windows provided excellent natural light for detailed needlework, and the walls were lined with cabinets containing threads of every imaginable color, bolts of silk and velvet, and tools of the trade that Sarah had mastered over her 15 years of service to the royal household. Mrs. Eleanor Whitmore, the head seamstress, was a woman in her 60s with silver hair pulled back in a severe bun and spectacles that she wore on a delicate chain around her neck. She had worked in the castle for nearly 40 years and was known for her exacting standards and encyclopedic knowledge of royal protocol. When Sarah and Thomas arrived, Mrs. Whitmore was examining a magnificent tapestry that depicted a medieval hunting scene, her trained eye searching for any imperfections that required attention. The reason for Thomas's summons soon became clear. Mrs. Whitmore explained that a visiting dignitary from France would be arriving the following week, and a particular tapestry in the guest quarters required urgent repair. The problem was that the damaged area was located in a narrow space behind a massive wooden cabinet that had been built into the wall. None of the adult seamstresses could fit into the confined space to perform the delicate needlework required, and the cabinet was too heavy and valuable to move without risking damage to both the furniture and the tapestry. Thomas, with his small stature and nimble fingers, was the perfect solution to their dilemma. Mrs. Whitmore had observed him during his mother's previous visits to the workshop and had noticed his careful attention to detail and steady hands when he helped sort threads and organize supplies. She believed he could be trained to perform the simple stitching required to repair the torn section of the tapestry, working from behind the cabinet where no adult could reach. The tapestry in question was located in the Blue Chamber, one of the castle's most prestigious guest rooms. It had been woven in the 15th century and depicted the legend of King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table. The damaged section showed Sir Galahad discovering the Holy Grail, but a tear in the fabric had separated the knight's sword from his hand, creating an unsightly gap that would be noticed immediately by any observant guest. Mrs. Whitmore spent the remainder of the morning teaching Thomas the basic techniques he would need to repair the tapestry. She showed him how to match the ancient threads, how to maintain the proper tension to avoid puckering the fabric, and how to follow the original weaving pattern to make his repairs invisible. Thomas proved to be a quick and eager student, his young mind absorbing the instructions with remarkable clarity and his small fingers adapting naturally to the delicate work. Sarah watched with a mixture of pride and anxiety as her son learned skills that had taken her years to master. She marveled at his concentration and precision, but worried about the enormous responsibility being placed on such young shoulders. The tapestry was worth more than her family's cottage, and any mistake could result in irreparable damage to a priceless work of art. Mrs. Whitmore, however, seemed confident in Thomas's abilities and praised his steady progress throughout the morning. As the lunch hour approached, Mrs. Whitmore led Sarah and Thomas to the Blue Chamber to examine the damaged tapestry firsthand. The room was breathtaking in its elegance, with walls painted in a soft shade of blue that seemed to change color depending on the angle of the light. The furniture was upholstered in matching silk, and fresh flowers had been arranged in crystal vases throughout the room. But it was the tapestry that dominated the space, covering nearly an entire wall with its rich colors and intricate detail. The cabinet that blocked access to the damaged area was an ornate piece of furniture crafted from mahogany and inlaid with mother-of-pearl designs. It had been built into an alcove specifically to display a collection of rare books and artifacts, and its position made it impossible for anyone larger than Thomas to reach the torn section of the tapestry behind it. Mrs. Whitmore demonstrated how Thomas would need to squeeze through the narrow gap between the cabinet and the wall, carrying his needle, threads, and a small oil lamp to provide light for his work. Thomas examined the working conditions carefully, testing the space to ensure he could move comfortably and safely. The gap was indeed tight, but he found that he could maneuver within it without difficulty. The torn section of the tapestry was about the size of his hand, and he could see where the original threads had frayed and separated. With Mrs. Whitmore's guidance, he studied the surrounding areas to understand the pattern he would need to recreate. After lunch, Thomas began his work in earnest. Sarah remained in the Blue Chamber to assist if needed, while Mrs. Whitmore returned to the textile workshop to oversee the other seamstresses. The castle around them continued its daily rhythm, with servants moving quietly through the corridors and guards changing shifts with military precision. But, in the Blue Chamber, time seemed suspended as Thomas focused entirely on his delicate task. Working by the light of the small oil lamp, Thomas carefully matched threads to recreate Sir Galahad's sword. Each stitch had to be perfect, following the exact pattern established by the original weavers centuries before. His small fingers moved with surprising confidence, guided by Mrs. Whitmore's instructions and his own natural aptitude for detailed work. Sarah watched from nearby, ready to offer encouragement or assistance, but marveling at her son's concentration and skill. Hours passed unnoticed as Thomas worked steadily on the repair. The torn section gradually began to take shape as the knight's sword reappeared under his careful stitching. The colors matched perfectly, and the tension of his work blended seamlessly with the surrounding fabric. Even to Sarah's untrained eye, it was clear that her son possessed a remarkable talent for this type of work. As the afternoon sun began to slant through the tall windows of the Blue Chamber, casting new patterns of light across the room, Thomas put the finishing touches on his repair work. The sword of Sir Galahad once again reached toward the Holy Grail, and the legendary scene was restored to its original magnificence. Mrs. Whitmore arrived to inspect the work and pronounced it acceptable, though Thomas could see in her eyes that she was more than pleased with the result. But, as Thomas prepared to squeeze back out from behind the cabinet, something caught his attention. In the dim space where he had been working, his oil lamp illuminated something that had been hidden from view for possibly decades or even centuries. Carved into the stone wall behind the tapestry, barely visible unless viewed from exactly the right angle, were symbols that looked unlike anything he had ever seen before. The markings appeared to be letters or numbers, but they were arranged in a pattern that seemed deliberately cryptic. Thomas traced them with his finger, feeling the rough edges where they had been carved into the ancient stone. They were clearly old, possibly as old as the castle itself, but they had been protected from the elements by their hidden location behind the cabinet and tapestry. Someone had gone to considerable trouble to conceal these markings, and Thomas wondered what they might mean. His first instinct was to call out to his mother and Mrs. Whitmore about his discovery, but something made him hesitate. The symbols seemed to radiate an aura of secrecy and importance that made him reluctant to share the knowledge casually. Instead, he carefully memorized the pattern of the markings, repeating them over and over in his mind to ensure he would remember them accurately. There were 12 symbols in total, arranged in 3 rows of 4, and each one was distinct and carefully formed. As Thomas finally emerged from behind the cabinet, his mind was racing with questions about what he had discovered. The repair work on the tapestry had been completed successfully, but the mysterious symbols had transformed what should have been a simple task into something far more intriguing. He said nothing about the markings as Mrs. Whitmore examined his needlework and praised his skill, but he could feel the weight of the secret settling in his chest like a stone. The remainder of the afternoon passed in a blur of congratulations and instructions for future work that Mrs. Whitmore hoped Thomas might be willing to undertake. It seemed that his talent for detailed needlework had opened new opportunities for both him and his mother within the royal household. But Thomas found it difficult to focus on these practical matters while the image of the mysterious symbols burned in his memory, demanding explanation and understanding. As evening approached and Sarah prepared to take Thomas home, they walked once more through the castle's magnificent corridors. But now Thomas saw everything with different eyes, wondering what other secrets might be hidden within the ancient walls, what other mysteries lay waiting to be discovered by someone small enough and curious enough to find them. The castle that had seemed like a fairy tale that morning now felt like a puzzle box, full of hidden compartments and concealed knowledge. The guards at the main entrance nodded politely as Sarah and Thomas departed, and the same gray-templed guard who had greeted them that morning smiled kindly at Thomas. But even this simple interaction felt charged with new meaning, as Thomas wondered whether the guard might know something about the symbols he had discovered, whether there were others in the castle who carried similar secrets. Walking home through the village streets as the sun set behind them, Thomas remained unusually quiet. Sarah attributed his pensiveness to exhaustion from his first day of real work, not knowing that her son's mind was consumed with questions about ancient carvings and hidden messages. The symbols seemed to pulse in his memory with each step, as if they were alive and demanding attention. That night, as Thomas lay in his small bed in their cottage, he stared at the ceiling and traced the mysterious symbols over and over in his mind. He had no way of knowing that his discovery would lead to events that would change not only his own life but the very protocols that governed the royal household. The secret he now carried was older and more significant than he could possibly imagine, and the weight of that knowledge would soon bring him face to face with the highest levels of power in the kingdom. 3 days after his discovery in the Blue Chamber, Thomas Fletcher found himself unable to concentrate on his usual activities. The mysterious symbols carved into the stone wall haunted his thoughts during meals, interrupted his sleep, and made it impossible for him to focus on the simple chores his mother assigned him around their cottage. He had drawn the symbols repeatedly on scraps of paper, trying different arrangements and combinations, hoping that somehow their meaning would become clear through repetition and study. Sarah noticed her son's distraction but attributed it to excitement about his success at the castle. Mrs. Whitmore had sent word that Thomas would be welcome to return for additional needlework projects, and Sarah assumed he was simply eager to continue his new career as an apprentice seamstress. She had no idea that Thomas spent hours each day mentally reviewing every detail of his time behind the cabinet, searching his memory for any clue that might explain the significance of what he had found. The symbols themselves were unlike any letters or numbers Thomas had encountered in his limited education. Some resembled Roman numerals, while others looked more like geometric shapes or astronomical signs. They were arranged in a precise grid pattern, suggesting that their placement was intentional rather than random. The depth and clarity of the carvings indicated they had been made with professional tools by someone skilled in stonework, not hastily scratched by an amateur. Thomas had considered several possibilities for what the symbols might represent. They could be a code used by builders or craftsmen who had worked on the castle centuries ago, marking some structural detail or construction date that was now forgotten. They might be decorative elements that had been covered when the tapestry was installed, never intended to remain hidden. Or they could be something far more significant, a secret message or instruction that had been deliberately concealed for reasons that Thomas could only imagine. On the fourth morning after his discovery, Thomas made a decision that would prove to have far-reaching consequences. He would return to the castle and somehow find a way to research the symbols, using the resources available in the royal library or seeking guidance from someone with knowledge of historical mysteries. The decision felt both terrifying and inevitable, like standing at the edge of a cliff and knowing that he would have to jump. The opportunity came when Mrs. Whitmore sent word that she needed Thomas's assistance with another repair project. A tapestry in the Green Chamber had developed a small tear that required the same type of careful work that only his small fingers could accomplish. Sarah was pleased by the continued employment opportunity, and Thomas eagerly accompanied her to the castle, his mind racing with plans for how he might investigate his discovery without arousing suspicion. The Green Chamber was located on the castle's second floor, accessible by a grand staircase that Thomas climbed with a mixture of nervousness and determination. The repair work itself was straightforward, similar to what he had accomplished in the Blue Chamber but requiring less time and effort. Mrs. Whitmore supervised his work for the first hour, then left him to complete the task independently while she attended to other duties. Thomas finished the repair quickly and efficiently, his skill having improved noticeably since his first attempt. But, instead of immediately reporting the completion of his work, he used the opportunity to explore the upper floors of the castle. He moved carefully and quietly through corridors he had never seen before, staying alert for servants or guards who might question his presence in areas where he had no official business. The castle's library was located in the North Tower, a circular room lined floor to ceiling with leather-bound volumes that represented centuries of collected knowledge. Thomas had never seen so many books in one place, and the sight was both intimidating and exhilarating. Tall windows provided natural light for reading, and comfortable chairs were arranged throughout the room for scholars and courtiers who came to study or research various topics. An elderly man with white hair and wire-rimmed spectacles sat at a large oak table, surrounded by open books and sheets of paper covered with notes. Thomas recognized him as Master Gregory, the castle's chief librarian and historian, a man renowned for his knowledge of royal genealogy and medieval history. Master Gregory looked up from his work as Thomas entered the library, and his expression shifted from mild curiosity to gentle concern. Thomas approached the librarian with carefully rehearsed words, explaining that he was working on tapestry repairs throughout the castle and had encountered some unusual markings that he hoped to understand better. He described the symbols in general terms, avoiding specific details about their location or the circumstances of their discovery. Master Gregory listened with growing interest, his scholarly instincts clearly aroused by the mention of mysterious historical artifacts. Without revealing the exact source of his information, Thomas carefully drew the 12 symbols on a piece of paper, recreating their precise arrangement and proportions. Master Gregory examined the drawings with intense concentration, occasionally consulting reference books from the shelves around them. His expression grew increasingly serious as he studied the markings, and Thomas began to sense that his discovery was more significant than he had initially realized. After nearly an hour of research, Master Gregory set down his magnifying glass and looked at Thomas with an expression of amazement and concern. The symbols, he explained, appeared to be a form of cipher used during the reign of King Edward III, more than 3 centuries earlier. This particular code had been employed for the most sensitive royal communications, including military strategies, diplomatic secrets, and matters of national security that could not risk being intercepted by enemies of the crown. The existence of such markings within the castle walls suggested the presence of a hidden message or instruction that had remained concealed for centuries. Master Gregory explained that very few people during Edward's reign would have possessed the knowledge necessary to create or interpret such a cipher, and its use indicated involvement in the highest levels of royal decision-making. The fact that it had been carved in stone rather than written on parchment suggested that the message was intended to be permanent and was considered too important to risk being lost or destroyed. Thomas listened to this explanation with growing excitement and apprehension. His accidental discovery had apparently uncovered a genuine historical mystery, something that could potentially rewrite understanding of medieval royal communications and protocols. But Master Gregory's serious demeanor also suggested that such knowledge carried significant responsibilities and potential dangers. The librarian asked Thomas to describe in more detail where he had encountered the symbols, emphasizing the importance of examining them in their original context to fully understand their meaning. Thomas found himself in a difficult position, wanting to share his discovery but also feeling protective of the secret that had been hidden for so long. After a moment's hesitation, he decided to trust Master Gregory with the complete truth about the Blue Chamber and the tapestry repair that had led to his discovery. Master Gregory's reaction was immediate and dramatic. He rose from his chair with surprising speed for a man of his age and began gathering specific books from the library shelves. The Blue Chamber, he explained, had been the preferred quarters for foreign dignitaries during the reign of Edward III, and it was also the location where several crucial diplomatic negotiations had taken place during a particularly turbulent period of English history. The presence of coded messages in that specific room suggested a connection to events that had shaped the course of the kingdom. Working together, Thomas and Master Gregory spent the next 2 hours deciphering the mysterious symbols. The process was slow and methodical, requiring consultation of multiple reference texts and careful analysis of each mark within the context of the medieval cipher system. Gradually, the random-seeming symbols began to resolve into words and phrases that carried urgent meaning across the centuries. The decoded message was brief but electrifying: Royal Guard Protocol 7, beneath third stone east wall, Crown protection absolute, trust none beyond blood. The implications of this discovery sent chills down Thomas's spine as he began to understand that he had stumbled upon something far more significant than a simple historical curiosity. Master Gregory explained that Protocol 7 had been a legendary emergency procedure mentioned in various historical documents but never fully explained or located. It was believed to have been a contingency plan developed during a period when the royal family faced unprecedented threats from both foreign enemies and domestic traitors. The protocol apparently involved specific instructions for protecting members of the royal family during times of extreme danger, but the details had been lost to history until now. The reference to the third stone east wall suggested that additional information or instructions were concealed somewhere else within the Blue Chamber, probably beneath a specific stone in the east wall of the room. The warning to trust none beyond blood implied that the protocol was designed to function even when conventional royal guards and advisors could not be trusted, relying only on family members or those bound by the strongest possible loyalties. Thomas and Master Gregory realized that they had uncovered evidence of a security system that had been created to protect the royal family during the most dangerous period in medieval English history. The fact that it had remained hidden for centuries suggested that it had never been activated, but also raised questions about whether similar protocols might still be relevant in the present day. The weight of this knowledge settled heavily on Thomas's young shoulders as he began to understand the magnitude of his discovery. Master Gregory emphasized the extreme importance of keeping this information confidential until they could determine the appropriate way to report their findings to the current royal household. Premature or inappropriate disclosure could have serious consequences, both for them personally and for the security procedures that continued to protect the royal family. As the afternoon progressed, Thomas and Master Gregory developed a plan for investigating the Blue Chamber more thoroughly. They would need to examine the east wall carefully to locate the third stone mentioned in the decoded message, but such an investigation would require official permission and careful coordination to avoid damaging either the room's furnishings or any historical artifacts that might be concealed there. Master Gregory decided that the matter was too significant to handle without involving higher authorities within the royal household. He would need to report their discovery to Sir William Harrington, the castle's chief administrator, who would in turn determine how to proceed with the investigation. Thomas felt both relieved and anxious about this decision, knowing that his involvement in the discovery would soon become known to people with far more power and authority than he had ever encountered. Before leaving the library, Master Gregory made Thomas promise to speak to no one about their discovery until appropriate permissions and protections could be arranged. The historian emphasized that knowledge of medieval royal security protocols could be extremely sensitive, even centuries after their creation, and that premature disclosure could put both of them in serious jeopardy. Thomas returned to the Green Chamber to complete his official duties, his mind reeling with the implications of everything he had learned. The simple tapestry repair that had brought him to the castle that day seemed trivial compared to the historical mystery he had helped uncover. As he worked on the final stitches, he found himself looking at the ancient walls around him with new eyes, wondering what other secrets might be hidden within the castle's stone foundations. When Thomas rejoined his mother for the journey home, he struggled to maintain a normal demeanor despite the extraordinary events of the day. Sarah noticed that he seemed even more thoughtful than usual, but she attributed his mood to the natural fatigue that came from concentrated needlework. She had no way of knowing that her 8-year-old son had just participated in decoding a message that had been hidden for more than 3 centuries. That evening, as Thomas lay in bed trying to process everything that had happened, he realized that his life had changed irrevocably. The innocent curiosity that had led him to examine the hidden symbols had drawn him into matters of historical significance and potential contemporary importance. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and responsibilities that he had never imagined, as the knowledge he now possessed began to reshape the world around him. The cottage felt small and simple after the grandeur of the castle library and the weight of the secrets he now carried. Thomas understood that he stood at the threshold of experiences that would transform him from a village child into someone entrusted with knowledge that had been hidden from the world for centuries. The journey that lay ahead was both thrilling and terrifying, and he knew that there would be no returning to the simple innocence of his life before the discovery. The following morning brought an early summons that would change everything Thomas thought he knew about his discovery and its consequences. A royal messenger arrived at the Fletcher cottage before dawn, bearing a sealed letter with instructions for both Thomas and his mother to present themselves immediately at the castle. The urgency of the summons was unmistakable, and Sarah felt a growing sense of anxiety as she prepared herself and Thomas for what could only be a matter of great importance. Sir William Harrington, the castle's chief administrator, was waiting for them in his private office when they arrived. He was a man in his 50s with penetrating gray eyes and a manner that suggested both intelligence and absolute discretion. Master Gregory stood beside him, looking grave and somewhat apprehensive. Thomas immediately understood that their discovery from the previous day had already been reported to the highest levels of castle administration. Sir William addressed Thomas directly, speaking with a seriousness that acknowledged the boy's central role in the unfolding situation despite his young age. The administrator explained that Master Gregory had briefed him thoroughly on the discovery of the coded message and its potential significance. After consulting with security advisors and historical experts throughout the night, they had determined that immediate investigation was necessary to understand the full implications of Thomas's find. The gravity of the situation became clear as Sir William outlined what they had learned from preliminary research into Protocol 7. The emergency procedures referenced in the decoded message had been created during a period when King Edward III faced simultaneous threats from French invasion, Scottish rebellion, and suspected traitors within his own court. The protocol represented the most extreme contingency planning ever undertaken by the medieval royal household, designed to function when all normal security measures had failed or been compromised. Thomas listened with growing amazement as Sir William explained that historians had long speculated about the existence of such emergency protocols but had never found concrete evidence of their implementation. The discovery of the coded message represented a breakthrough in understanding medieval royal security procedures and potentially provided insights into how the current royal family might be protected during extraordinary circumstances. But the implications extended far beyond historical curiosity. Sir William revealed that preliminary analysis suggested Protocol 7 might still be relevant to contemporary security concerns. The fundamental principles of royal protection remained constant across centuries, and emergency procedures that had been effective in medieval times might provide valuable guidance for modern security challenges. This possibility transformed Thomas's accidental discovery into a matter of current national importance. Sarah Fletcher found herself overwhelmed by the magnitude of what her son had uncovered. She had expected his needlework skills to provide modest supplementary income for their household, not to thrust them into matters involving royal security and national history. Sir William assured her that both she and Thomas would be protected and rewarded for their cooperation, but he also emphasized the critical importance of maintaining absolute secrecy about everything they had learned. The investigation of the Blue Chamber would begin immediately, with Thomas playing a crucial role due to his unique ability to access areas that remained inaccessible to adults. Sir William had assembled a small team of trusted experts, including Master Gregory, a structural engineer familiar with medieval construction techniques, and Captain Marcus Thornfield, the head of the castle's security detail. This group would work together to locate and examine whatever additional information or materials might be concealed according to the decoded message. Captain Thornfield was a formidable man with military bearing and keen intelligence, responsible for coordinating all security measures within the castle grounds. His presence emphasized the seriousness with which the administration viewed Thomas's discovery. The captain questioned Thomas thoroughly about every detail of his time behind the cabinet, seeking to understand exactly what he had seen and how the symbols had been positioned relative to other features of the room. The team assembled in the Blue Chamber within the hour, bringing specialized equipment for examining the stone walls without causing damage to the room's historical features or valuable furnishings. The massive cabinet would need to be carefully moved to provide full access to the east wall, a delicate operation that required coordination between preservation experts and security personnel. Thomas watched with fascination as professionals worked with tools and techniques that seemed almost magical in their precision and effectiveness. Moving the ancient cabinet revealed the east wall in its entirety for the first time in decades, possibly centuries. The exposed stonework showed clear evidence of age and careful craftsmanship, with each block fitted precisely into place by medieval masons who had built the castle to last through the ages. Thomas felt a thrill of excitement as he realized they were about to uncover secrets that had been hidden since before his grandparents' had been born. Counting from the northern corner of the east wall, the team located the third stone referenced in the decoded message. It appeared identical to the surrounding blocks at first glance, but closer examination revealed subtle differences in the mortar around its edges. The structural engineer determined that the stone could be safely removed without compromising the wall's integrity, and specialized tools were used to extract it carefully from its centuries-old position. Behind the third stone lay a cavity that had been deliberately created during the castle's construction. Within this hidden space, wrapped in oiled leather that had preserved them remarkably well, were documents that would prove to be of extraordinary historical and contemporary significance. Thomas held his breath as Master Gregory carefully unwrapped the ancient materials, revealing parchments covered with text in the same cipher that had led them to this discovery. The documents contained detailed instructions for Protocol 7, outlining emergency procedures that were breathtaking in their comprehensiveness and sophistication. The protocol included specific evacuation routes through hidden passages within the castle, coded communication systems for coordinating with loyal supporters outside the immediate court, and contingency plans for establishing temporary royal authority in secure locations throughout the kingdom. The level of planning and preparation revealed a medieval security apparatus far more advanced than historians had previously imagined. But the most startling revelation came in the form of a sealed letter addressed to future generations of royal protectors. The letter, written in the hand of King Edward III himself, explained that Protocol 7 was designed to be activated not only during his own reign but whenever future monarchs faced similar existential threats. The procedures were intended as a permanent emergency resource, available to any English ruler who found themselves in desperate circumstances requiring extreme measures for survival and continuity of the crown. Thomas found himself at the center of discussions that would normally involve only the highest levels of government and royal administration. His role as the discoverer of the protocols, combined with his unique physical ability to access concealed areas of the castle, had made him an essential participant in understanding and potentially implementing procedures that could affect the safety of the current royal family. The weight of this responsibility was both thrilling and terrifying for an 8-year-old boy. Sir William and Captain Thornfield spent hours analyzing the decoded documents, comparing medieval procedures with modern security protocols and assessing their potential relevance to contemporary threats. The emergency communication systems described in the ancient papers included techniques that remained viable centuries later, and the evacuation routes through hidden castle passages were still physically intact and potentially usable. The investigation revealed that the castle contained a network of concealed passages and chambers that had been unknown to current administration and security personnel. These hidden areas, designed to provide emergency access and escape routes during medieval sieges, represented significant security assets that could enhance protection for royal family members during modern crises. Thomas's discovery had not only uncovered historical treasures but had also revealed contemporary security resources. As the day progressed, Thomas learned that his involvement in these matters was far from over. The complete investigation of Protocol 7 would require weeks or months of careful work, examining every aspect of the medieval emergency procedures and determining how they might be adapted for modern use. His ability to access narrow spaces within the castle's ancient construction would be needed repeatedly as the team explored the full extent of the hidden security network. Captain Thornfield explained to Thomas that his unique role in this investigation came with serious responsibilities and potential dangers. Knowledge of royal security procedures, whether medieval or modern, was among the most closely guarded secrets in the kingdom. Thomas would need to understand and accept the obligations that came with such knowledge, including the absolute requirement for discretion and the personal risks associated with being trusted with information that could affect national security. The captain's words were sobering, but Thomas felt a surge of pride at being considered trustworthy enough to participate in matters of such importance. His accidental discovery had transformed him from a village child into someone entrusted with secrets that had been hidden from the world for centuries. The recognition of his value and capabilities was both thrilling and overwhelming. Sir William arranged for Thomas and his mother to be provided with temporary quarters within the castle during the investigation period. This decision was made partly for convenience, allowing Thomas to be immediately available when his assistance was needed, but also for security reasons. Knowledge of the Protocol 7 discovery needed to be contained within the smallest possible circle of trusted individuals until the full implications could be understood and appropriate protective measures implemented. The quarters assigned to the Fletchers were comfortable rooms in the servants' wing of the castle, far grander than their cottage but modest compared to the luxurious accommodations provided for distinguished guests. Thomas was delighted with the arrangement, which allowed him to explore more of the castle during his free time and to observe the daily operations of the royal household from an insider's perspective. That evening, as Thomas lay in his new bed within the ancient castle walls, he reflected on the extraordinary changes that had occurred in his life over the past few days. His simple interest in needlework had led to the discovery of medieval secrets that were reshaping understanding of royal history and potentially influencing contemporary security procedures. The journey from village child to keeper of royal secrets had happened so quickly that he sometimes felt dizzy trying to comprehend all the implications. But, beneath the excitement and amazement, Thomas also felt the weight of the responsibilities that now rested on his young shoulders. He understood that he had become part of something much larger than himself, something that connected him to centuries of English history and to the ongoing protection of the royal family. The knowledge he possessed was both a privilege and a burden, and he was beginning to understand that great secrets always came with great responsibilities. As he drifted off to sleep in his new surroundings, Thomas could hear the sounds of the castle around him, guards changing shifts, servants moving quietly through corridors, and the distant chiming of bells marking the passage of time. He was no longer just a visitor to this magnificent place, he had become part of its ongoing story, and tomorrow would bring new discoveries and challenges that would continue to shape both his own future and the ancient institution he was now helping to protect. 2 weeks into the investigation of Protocol 7, Thomas Fletcher had become an integral part of a security review that would ultimately reach the highest levels of the British government. What had begun as an accidental discovery during routine needlework had evolved into a comprehensive examination of royal protection procedures that combined medieval wisdom with modern security technology. Thomas's role had expanded far beyond simply accessing narrow spaces. He had become a translator between ancient secrets and contemporary needs. The investigation had revealed that the castle contained an extensive network of hidden passages, concealed chambers, and emergency facilities that had remained unknown and unused for centuries. These medieval security features represented a parallel infrastructure within the castle, designed to function independently of the main buildings and systems. Thomas's small stature and growing expertise in navigating these spaces had made him indispensable to the team mapping and evaluating this hidden network. Captain Thornfield had taken personal responsibility for Thomas's security training, teaching him to move silently through the concealed passages and to recognize potential dangers within the ancient construction. The captain explained that knowledge of these routes made Thomas himself a security asset who required protection, but also that his unique abilities came with corresponding obligations to use them responsibly and effectively. The most remarkable discovery had come in the form of a hidden chamber beneath the castle's foundations, accessible only through a narrow tunnel that required someone of Thomas's size to navigate safely. This chamber contained medieval weapons, emergency supplies, and communication equipment that had been designed to support royal family members during extended sieges or occupation by hostile forces. The preserved condition of these materials demonstrated the extraordinary planning and craftsmanship of medieval security preparations. Master Gregory had spent countless hours working with Thomas to decode additional messages found throughout the hidden network. Each cipher revealed new aspects of Protocol 7, painting a picture of emergency procedures that were remarkable in their comprehensiveness and sophistication. The medieval planners had anticipated scenarios ranging from foreign invasion to domestic rebellion, creating contingency measures for every conceivable threat to royal authority and safety. But the most significant development had come when Sir William decided that the discovery required briefing at the highest levels of government. The Prime Minister's office had been informed of the situation, and a special committee had been formed to evaluate the contemporary relevance of the medieval protocols. Thomas found himself scheduled to participate in briefings that would include officials from Scotland Yard, MI5, and the Royal Protection Service. The night before these crucial meetings, Thomas couldn't sleep. He stood at the window of his castle quarters, looking out over the moonlit grounds and trying to comprehend how his life had transformed so dramatically. In less than a month, he had gone from being an unknown village child to someone whose discoveries were being discussed in the highest circles of British government. The weight of this responsibility sometimes felt overwhelming, but he also felt a deep pride in having contributed something meaningful to the protection of the royal family. Sarah Fletcher had watched her son's transformation with a mixture of pride and anxiety. She had been briefed on the significance of his discoveries and the importance of maintaining absolute secrecy, but she sometimes worried that the responsibilities placed on Thomas were too great for someone so young. Sir William had assured her that Thomas was being protected and guided by the most capable people in the kingdom, but the magnitude of the situation still left her feeling somewhat helpless and concerned. The morning of the high-level briefings arrived with unseasonable warmth and bright sunshine, as if the weather itself was celebrating the momentous day ahead. Thomas dressed carefully in new clothes that had been provided for the occasion, understanding that his appearance before government officials required him to look mature and responsible despite his youth. His mother helped him practice the presentation he would give about his discoveries, emphasizing the importance of speaking clearly and answering questions honestly. The briefing took place in the castle's most formal conference room, a magnificent chamber with portraits of former monarchs lining the walls and a massive oak table that had witnessed centuries of important decisions. Thomas found himself seated between Sir William and Master Gregory, facing officials whose names and titles represented the highest levels of British security and government administration. The Home Secretary, a distinguished woman with silver hair and penetrating eyes, led the questioning. She listened with obvious fascination as Thomas described his discovery of the coded symbols and the subsequent investigation that had revealed the full extent of Protocol 7. Her questions were detailed and probing, designed to ensure that every aspect of the situation was fully understood before decisions were made about how to proceed. Colonel James Morrison from the Royal Protection Service was particularly interested in the physical security features that had been discovered within the castle. He questioned Thomas extensively about the hidden passages, emergency chambers, and communication systems, taking detailed notes about access routes and defensive capabilities. The colonel's expertise in modern security procedures allowed him to appreciate the sophistication of the medieval planning that Thomas had helped uncover. Deputy Assistant Commissioner Helen Wright from Scotland Yard focused on the intelligence and communication aspects of the protocols. She was amazed by the complexity of the cipher systems and the redundancy built into the emergency communication networks. The medieval planners had created multiple backup systems for every critical function, ensuring that royal protection could continue even if primary systems were compromised or destroyed. As the briefing progressed, it became clear that Thomas's discoveries had implications that extended far beyond historical curiosity. The principles underlying Protocol 7 remained relevant to contemporary threats, and several of the specific procedures could be adapted for modern use with relatively minor modifications. The hidden infrastructure within the castle provided security options that were unknown to potential adversaries and could serve as valuable backup systems during crises. The decision was made to implement a modernized version of Protocol 7 as part of the comprehensive security arrangements for the royal family. This would involve updating the medieval procedures with contemporary technology while preserving the fundamental principles that had made them effective. Thomas's continued involvement would be essential during the implementation phase, as his knowledge of the hidden passages and chambers was unmatched by any other individual. But, with this decision came recognition that Thomas's life would be permanently changed by his involvement in royal security matters. The officials explained that he would need to sign the Official Secrets Act despite his young age, binding him to lifelong confidentiality about everything he had learned. He would also receive ongoing security training and protection, as his knowledge made him valuable to those who might wish to harm the royal family. The magnitude of these commitments was both thrilling and sobering for Thomas. He understood that he was being offered an extraordinary opportunity to serve his country and protect the royal family, but also that this service would require sacrifices and responsibilities that would affect every aspect of his future life. The decision had to be made not just for himself but for his family, whose lives would also be changed by his continued involvement in security matters. After lengthy discussion with his mother and careful consideration of all the implications, Thomas accepted the responsibilities that came with his unique knowledge and capabilities. Sir William arranged for both Thomas and Sarah to receive financial security that would ensure their well-being regardless of how Thomas's role evolved over time. More importantly, they would become part of an extended family of people dedicated to protecting the monarchy and preserving the traditions that had sustained the British crown for centuries. The implementation of the modernized Protocol 7 began immediately, with Thomas working alongside engineers, security experts, and technology specialists to upgrade the medieval systems for contemporary use. Hidden passages were equipped with modern lighting and communication systems while preserving their concealed nature. Emergency chambers were stocked with current supplies and equipment while maintaining their historical character. Thomas's role evolved from discoverer to consultant and, eventually, to guardian of secrets that bridged centuries of royal protection. He learned advanced security procedures, studied the history and traditions of the monarchy, and developed skills that would allow him to serve effectively in whatever capacity his unique knowledge might require. His education was expanded to include subjects that would prepare him for a lifetime of service to the crown. The transformation was remarkable not just in its scope but in its speed. Within 6 months of his accidental discovery, Thomas had become one of the most trusted individuals in the royal security apparatus. His youth, which had initially seemed like a limitation, proved to be an advantage in many ways. His fresh perspective and lack of preconceptions allowed him to see possibilities and solutions that had escaped more experienced professionals. But, perhaps the most significant change was in Thomas himself. The shy village boy who had been brought to the castle to perform simple needlework had developed into a confident and capable young person who understood his own value and potential. He had learned that even the smallest individual could make contributions of enormous importance, that curiosity and careful attention to detail could uncover secrets that had been hidden for centuries. The annual review of the Protocol 7 implementation took place exactly 1 year after Thomas's initial discovery. Representatives from throughout the government and security services gathered to assess the effectiveness of the modernized procedures and to plan for their continued development. Thomas, now 9 years old but possessing knowledge and experience far beyond his years, participated as an equal in discussions that would affect the safety of the royal family for generations to come. As the meeting concluded and the officials departed, Thomas remained in the conference room where his journey had effectively begun. Sir William joined him, and together they looked out through the tall windows at the castle grounds where Thomas had first walked with his mother, nervous and excited about a simple needlework assignment that would change everything. The old administrator smiled at the remarkable young man beside him, recognizing that Thomas's story was far from over. The protocols they had discovered and implemented were designed to protect the monarchy through whatever challenges the future might bring, and Thomas would be part of that protection for as long as he chose to serve. His accidental discovery had revealed that the most important secrets are sometimes hidden in plain sight, waiting for someone with the curiosity and courage to look beyond the obvious. In the years that followed, Thomas Fletcher would become a legend within the security services, the child who had uncovered medieval secrets that revolutionized royal protection. But, more than that, he had proven that extraordinary contributions could come from the most unexpected sources, that the safety of the crown depended not just on formal institutions but on the dedication and insight of individuals who understood that some responsibilities transcended personal interests. The castle continued its daily rhythm around them, with guards changing shifts, servants attending to their duties, and visitors marveling at the historical grandeur that surrounded them. But, beneath this familiar surface, a network of secrets and protections functioned silently, guarding treasures more valuable than any artifacts or artworks. And, at the heart of this protection was the knowledge that a young child's curiosity had uncovered, proving once again that the most powerful discoveries often come from the most innocent questions.